Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. Yu, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our uh, monthly contributors and our one-time donation supporters. And we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, 15, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. So on A Neighbor's Choice today, I'm your host, David Gornoski with Jordan Landfear, and we are looking at the news headlines, as crazy as they are, to give our quick kind of summation of the lay of the land of what the news media narratives, the 24-hour news cycle is buzzing around. So let's go with the first. I like drudgereport.com because they give you a good medley of leftist and establishment narratives, anti-Trump narratives, and then they also give you some random stuff like House of Hell, 5,000 cats found in a little old lady's studio apartment, just to let you know that somebody who either is Matt Drudge or someone who's a fan of Matt Drudge is still allowed to put a link up there. First story is appeals court judges deeply skeptical of Trump immunity. Another headline: the Don's lawyer argues president can assassinate rivals, in all text, all caps. Ex-president warns of bedlam if prosecutions continue. Hot Mike has journalists caught joking about him being murdered like JFK. Top headline: violent political threats surge as 24 begins. Next story: the tape exists, declares Epstein victim. More docs released, developing. You know, it's just the most, it's like the news as a movie has truly jumped the shark. I mean, you can't, how can you get more sensational than every other headline being murder, death, assassinations, arrests, aliens, and pedophile islands, and everybody who's somebody in politics or movie being associated with this creepy island. Rogers says never called Kimmel a pedophile. I mean, this is the headline. This. Imagine waking up in 1980 or 1952, and these are the headlines that millions of people picked up on their newspaper. I mean, they would think that a psychopath, insane person, which, you know, Drudge does know how to write that way, but, you know, but these are still reflections of what all the other cookie cutter outlets are talking about. You would think that some kind of insane criminal psychopath had gotten a hold of a typewriter and had typed all over, scribblings all over your paper, you know? Hey, honey, look at the headlines today. Violent political threats begin. Murdered like JFK. Don lawyer says they can assassinate rivals. You know, Jimmy Kimmel, who is their version of Johnny Carson, but he, you know, a much more diminished clown. He's not a pedophile. That's your headlines? I mean, this is insanity. But this is what, you know, this is what we're being like slow boiled in a much more quicker way as our new normal. Just total insanity.
You were talking with Father Turbo about this sort of reality that's happening in our society right now, where he kept saying that phrase that it's a slow boil. Maybe that's what they want us to think. because like when y'all were talking about that, that's exactly what y'all came to agree with, is that there's, him and his little community. He's got this awesome little snow globe of a world where he can chat it up with his church group there, and connect and grow, and they're tapped into this vibrational frequency of freedom and freedom of thought. And um, it doesn't seem to be that this is the case, person to person, these stories. I think it's a feeding frenzy of let's tap this fear that may not actually be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, yeah, as long as you're plugged into it, you know, you're going to be feeding into that, whether you're reacting against it or in compliance with the narrative. You're going to be affected by it. And yet you can't really escape its effects because you can't afford a car, you can't afford gas, you can't afford a house, you can't afford to be in debt, you can't afford the debt, you can't afford, um, you know, your city can't afford to keep things nice, and your businesses and mom and pops and chains have a hard time keeping people uh, employed because they don't want to work. So things are fraying apart. The effects of these psychopathic people and events are being felt all around us in some ways. But you're certainly in a healthier mindset if you're not dwelling in those stories on a daily basis. But its effects still can really rock and mess up your world. So it's kind of it's like a catch-22. If you're in the news cycle and reading these news outlets, whether you're reading an anti-establishment perspective or an establishment perspective, but it's still, they're all operating on the same dialectic discourse about the same stories usually. If you're all up in that all the time, it's going to draw you into its despair, its fear, its anger as a product. And that's one of the things that I talk about as media, is like, media is not just the content, it's actually the effect that it has on you as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And one low way of looking at it is just the emotional disposition and attitude that it gives you when you experience it. And all of the media, whether it's establishment or anti-establishment, has got a few select feelings of despair, fear, anger, hate. Usually are the feelings that you come away experiencing. You don't get a sense of peace, hope, wonder. Those are feelings you don't get. You don't get the feeling of awe in a good way. You're just awed by the darkness of so many stories flooding you with kind of desensitizing type effects. And the callousness that it's creating in those who consume the content the most is disturbing. The way in which the folks who believe in CNN and New York Times, they have a callousness and a hatred for Trump supporters, to want them to be in prison and see them as monsters. And some of that is reciprocated in the anti-establishment side of things. If you don't pay attention to anything, though, it'll still, like I said, you're still going to be affected by usurious interest and debt and inflation and foods prices going up, and people trying to return tribalism to your communities by race or gender divisions. And so it's a vortex of a time that we're in. It's an apocalyptic time of unveiling. But for every unveiling that happens, there's a false unveiling that happens too. Like the whole woke critical theory thing is all a fake apocalypse, where it's like, I'll tell you how the world really works. whiteness is the construct that, animates all evil in the world. It's the whiteness. Let me show you the deep, secret behind the curtain. Or it's patriarchy is the secret that's holding everything back. That's everything wrong in your life is patriarchy. And obviously, for those of us who are schooled in mimetic theory, we can see and understand that those are mimetic contagions that ultimately are trying to build a consensus of scapegoating aggression against abstractions, which can then be distilled into aggressions against individuals who are associated with those abstractions, like patriarchy, whiteness, or whatever. So
Don't you
that's
think
kind of
some
the
of those
yes.
can? Don't you think some of those can be beat down by these sort of grassroots campaign of stepping out in the best amount of faith that you've got and start a business? Um, some of what Cat Williams said in his interview is kind of poignant to what you're saying. It's like, if you're doing the little things that you can do in your little bubble of a world, um, when the camera pans back on your life, you've done the little things throughout your life that lead to this big grand moment where you can say, I held the line all the way through. Don't you think that takes you out of that zeitgeist of fear and debasement and the debauchery of the culture?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I think so. There's two types of sloth. There's sloth of like what people typically think of as playing sitting on the couch too much and not wanting to do anything with your life and your talents. That's one type of sloth. And there's this other type of sloth where you're working for money's sake and for competition's sake to compete with your neighbor and you know, your abstraction of who you think you need to be better than in that mimetic sense. And both of those are sloth, right? They're both like vain chasing money and mimetic rivalry, and that means pursuing careers and vocations that may be lucrative but are not really beautiful. They're not beautiful jobs in terms of maybe you're doing something that's a little bit sharky, or what I mean, manipulative to sell. Maybe you're that's how you make money, is cutting corners in a way that's not legally illegal but is morally a little bit dubious and ethically diminishing of you. I think that's unfortunately what ends up happening with a lot of small business jobs, because there's so much inertia against productivity in this economy. So much of it is geared towards waste and lying and deception that it echoes into the culture everywhere. So all the people that you are told to emulate as role models in our society are liars. Like, politicians are liars. They're very good liars. They lie without even knowing they lie, without you even seeing any of the poker tails of lying. And so when that's your role models, when you have a state-oriented society, it follows that lying mentality will seep into industries that are heavily regulated by that same government, right? And are heavily influenced by those role models that emanate lying and deception and trickery and me first and cowardice, moral cowardice. Having said all of that, though, yes, if you can get past the gauntlet of regulations, which are like the rites of passage of our time. Oh, you want to have financial freedom? You don't want to be a debt slave? Here's this massive license you have to get into this business. Here's this massive regulation compliance you have to have if you want to have more than this many employees. Here's what you have to do for HR compliances. You can't have this or that, or you got to, this or this or that or this or that. You got to calculate all these um these kind of forces of decay into your decision making. And that if you get through all of that, and you can still keep your moral integrity and your vision and your dream, and you can keep motivated beyond just mimetic competition and trying to have a bigger house and a bigger mortgage. If you can get through all that, then what's left is that which will be the foundation of civilization and progress, from a skin in the game perspective, right? And that's a hard thing. In other words, what I'm trying to say is it's not as easy as the old, and that's not what you're saying, but it's not as easy as the old dichotomy of liberal versus conservative or socialist versus business person, where it's like, well, get away from government bureaucrats and get away from, corrupt big unions and do honest work in the private sector. The honest truth is so much of the private sector is morally corrupted too, and morally, diminished. It's not beautiful, right? So the whole thing has to have a reckoning. Our whole society at its core has to have a reckoning. And that's what this apocalyptic time is for. It's the fruit is going to fall from the tree and it's going to rot, and something is going to come out of that seed that's planted in that decaying effect. But there's this counterforce that wants to prevent true maturation and growth from happening in that apocalypse. And therefore, there's all these false apocalypse unveilings that are taking place to counter signal and to create noise for the real apocalypse, right? If your heart knows things are completely wrong, the only thing evil can do is to drown out the signal with noise, right? So you can't hear clearly. It's, because your appetite hungers for an apocalyptic unveiling. And there's all these snake oil narratives that have been constructed and are being constructed to satisfy that appetite for apocalyptic unveiling truth, but misdirect it. And that's what makes it such a challenge, right? To live by the truth is that it's dangerous. It's very tiresome, and it's dangerous because of how socially precarious to live by truth truly is. Right? To live by truth in the true sense of the word. Like, how many people get told, whatever, man, you need to have, if you want to be successful, you've got to buy a home with a mortgage, right? And we know that predatory compound type, it's not technically, but it's still compound style interest is involved with that whole game. And we know how rigged it is. We know how expensive materials are for building because of all the government intervention that protects special interests and cronies in that whole step of the process. And yet people still say it's part of your rite of passage to be a legit member of society, to take on that yoke of interest and debt, and carry that load of financial burden, which is usurious, because I did it too, and you need to do that too, right? And you're not a productive member of society. You're not one to be emulated unless you go through that. And furthermore, another rite of passage is you need to be able to get into stocks or investment funds, which will play the casino economy and come out on top somehow through that risk-taking enterprise, right? Which is another scam machine. And you're told you have to do that if you want to have a successful retirement, right?
But can't we start teaching the communities in which we're involved these things, with the young men, especially young women that are
teaching what?
Start teaching them these things that, the stock game is a shortcut to heaven that leads to hell, because it leads you right back into a gambling mindset. It's not real. It's not tangible.
Yeah, it's paper pushing.
No work
to
achieve an outcome.
Yeah. If you told me I could make, I don't know, I know this is kind of a weird thing, but it's like, if 5 or 6 figures doing something very beautiful and exciting versus make double that just paper pushing stock trickery and you did it. I mean, I understand how the practical reality of wealth can change your mindset, but just from where I'm at, I would rather make a tremendously amount less money from a financial reward standpoint, doing something that truly resonates with, the vision that I've been given by my creator, rather than just, hey, you made a lot of money and what'd you do? I was just playing a little game, little casino thing that we call Wall Street. Oh, that's really, wow. It's fantastic. So you're really good at like casino gambling and, you know how to work that. Oh yeah. Okay. What are you going to do with that? Well, got this big house and, it's got this cookie cutter yard and, it's got, it's got the, it's got the same spray for pesticide that everybody else in the neighborhood has. It's what I mean? I got the same iPhone that you have, even though you didn't sell out your whole life for a casino economy. And I can go to the same, basically everything ends up being about the same, really. You just can have a lot more of some of this stuff with a little bit more ease, right? If you get rich. But it doesn't seem to be the kind of rich that you get for that kind of blasé slothfulness, in my opinion, is not something worth shooting for, right? But what I'm trying to say is that, like, in our false dichotomy of leftist culture versus right culture, you're just left with that kind of fuzzy option. If you want to do leftist, you complain about you're a waiter or waitress and you complain about your tips. If you want to do right-wing stuff, you do some gimmick thing that makes a lot of money that's not really creating real value and productivity for people. It's just kind of finding a little niche loophole that brings a little bit of a windfall. And that's not how business and startups should be oriented towards. But because there's so much trickery and cowardice built into our whole culture and all the role models that we're given on TV to emulate and social media to emulate, we end up building that same kind of loophole, that same kind of looking for the shortcut mentality in everything we do. And so no one like, for, the only person I've heard talk about making, housing radically more affordable for young people and people is Kanye West. And I don't know what he's done with that so far, but, I heard him talk about that. But that was like, but he according to TV Land, he's the official, untouchable in terms of mega stars.
Right.
So what does that tell you? That the only guy or woman who talks about actually trying to, and I'm not saying that's why they made him that way. It's just like that was the only person within that cast of characters, from Oprah to, past legends like Mr. Rogers and whatever. The only one who I've heard talk about at that level of mass influence is a guy who's officially considered untouchable on every level, mostly in terms of being a model citizen. What does that tell you? How jacked up, how twisted our values are as a society?
Mm-hmm.
Dave Ramsey comes close on the level of, hey, you stay out of debt. But where he makes a mistake, in my opinion, is by telling people, he's kind of norming on a lot of the other investment ideas he has, but he's also he's always very dutiful about making sure everybody pays off their, they make sure they pay off their oligarchic interest, debt that they've accumulated, right? And he doesn't, I think that, from a biblical standpoint, Jubilee principles can be brought into the picture a little bit more honestly, and saying, when you've been ensnared, and the Jubilee principle wasn't even based on being entrapped into usurious debt. It was for a much more modest form of loans, right? But how much more so should that principle kick in our conversations when it comes to being ensnared into usurious debt traps that are based on fraud, like fractional reserve lending and fiat currency and artificial price fixing and the boom bust cycle. All of those three things just there: inflation, fractional reserve lending, more than you have on reserve in your bank, boom bust cycle, the price fixing that's all based into that whole thing. All those things are extremely damaging to the worker, to the productive class. It's all based on the parasite industries and parasite special interests being able to have closer proximity to the state and its friends that get the cash first. The productive people, the people who save and build and take risk, which is what you're supposed to do to be a human, those people are the last to get that. Those are the lads, the savers, the builders, the hard workers, the people who work for themselves. They've got all the regulations and everything already bearing down on them. And then you've got these constant media psyop that's running 24/7 to just continue to color their disposition and their attitude into a state of despair. And I don't think it's a coincidence that those people who are most well equipped to build things, which is what you need to build society. You need to encourage and really support those who build and can use a wrench and can make things and can, carpentry and engineering and, mechanical work and chemical engineering, all these different things that make things. Oftentimes they tend to be, especially if the working class jobs, and not even just that, the university jobs too, but they tend to be the ones most numbing out in our society. Mm-hmm. The ones who could actually accomplish dreams and who actually can put teeth to dreams, who can put flesh to the bones of a dream or a vision, are the ones most stereotypically associated with alcoholism or fentanyl or other things that are just totally numbing them out and checking them out of reality when they're not working themselves. And so that Oliver Anthony song, about working all these hours, getting no pay, and there's a part of that that's just kind of whiny that you can look at, but there's also a real side to that of the people who could actually build things together are the ones most told to numb out and check out of reality because you've got nothing to say,
So and I think they can't fall back on a church to support them either.
Yeah.
A proper priest in his place understands all of these things.
Yeah.
A proper shepherd can guide and lead and direct you financially, can lead you relationally with your wife, can lead you societally with how to function here, there, and at work.
Yeah.
And help you make proper decisions in the wisdom that he's gained.
Yeah.
What you're saying is the proper place for the church, and it's non-existent. That's why you have these monkey wrench kind of guys that are useless and debased in society, and like the sloth that you mentioned, because they have no grounding feature to something greater than themselves. Right. So yeah, I'm hitting the bottle tonight. Yep, just like I did last night. Stuck.
Yeah. And that's, you can't have roads and functioning plumbing systems and stuff like that if that continues long term, Yeah. Because everybody who will be rewarded and is rewarded in this new normal economy are the ones who are playing the grift of BS, paper pushing or clout chasing or a hall monitor lecturing about microaggressions. That's where the money is, right? The money is in the appearance economy, the appearance of status economy. Not even aesthetics. There's no aesthetics. They're disgusting, there's no aesthetics, but just the appearance of status is the economy that everybody. There's a lot of cash flow there, and they're mostly in debt to student loans too, so they get their own little. They're all paying the piper some way, but that's kind of the lay of the land in terms of economic growth. But we don't have to. I always want to tell people you don't have to stay there. And probably if I didn't say that right now, maybe it'd be more attractive video to share with people. But don't have to stay there and stay in that state of learned helplessness.
Mm.
But just reading those headlines, I mean, you just see them normalizing violence and hate, and there is no neutral ground anymore, in terms of, well, Trump has his perspective and Biden has his. There's none of that. It's like a cutthroat, end of the world scenario, whichever camp you're in, there is no give. It's just pure tension, pure polarization, pure stress, right? And it's an unhealthy stress because there's no, and this is where we understand the psychological effects of the scapegoat mechanism. There are no, there's no satisfactory release valves for the level of stress they're creating. Like on the Biden, the establishment, NPR, New York Times, that bubble of reality, as lying and deceitful as it is, and as intelligent as they are at manipulation, I mean, if they defeat their opponent in Trump, that's the worst thing they could have happen. I mean, there's going to be something else and something else and something. They can't, you know what I mean? That stress doesn't stop. There's no release from it. There's no, that tension, that pressure cooker environment does not get released. There's no catharsis. There's no, okay, all right, we can breathe now. We don't need to numb out. They have to take their drug in a different way. And Curtis Yarvin, who is a political writer, we've had him on the show a few times, and I've disagreed with his philosophy, but he still makes some poignant criticisms about the status quo of things. He says that the establishment has, that the liberals have heroin leftists and conservatives are cocaine conservatives.
Mm.
And that's their choice of drugs. Whereas the heroin addict just kind of checking out, everything's fine. It's just kind of, because it's so, the world is so painful. Oh my goodness, just checking out. Whereas the conservative is, hyping himself up with cocaine. Oh man, everything's great. I can do it. I can achieve greatness. No, it's not. It's not going to happen through politics. But the way in which those kind of ideological drugs operate in different ways kind of reflects the culture of the establishment versus the anti-establishment. And he calls for, not participating in the illusion of political contest in the way that, Conservative Inc. does it. And I think that's largely correct, but I don't agree with his solution either, which is to call for an FDR type, monarchical presidential figure to clean that up. I think that's kind of a daydream as well. But
don't you think that these are, like you like to say, these are technologies produced by what Christ did, right? So prior to Christ, who's unveiling the temple's undue pressure on the society? The temple layout and the temple rule was not seen prior to Christ.
Yeah.
He unveiled how they were being suppressed, how they were being oppressed, without Rome being in the conversation, right? That's why Jesus stops Peter and says, "Whoa! You don't know where you're coming from."
Yeah.
He thinks this is about Rome. It's like, hold on, you got to start here, my friend.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Christ had to first unveil, hold on, this whole temple has you by the throat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to start there before you can ever touch Rome. That's why Jesus just stands there and says, "Yeah, I am."
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, you have this transition between the collective temple as the basis of reality, which is reflective in the kind of a ethno-tribal orientation of the world. And then he says that temple will be destroyed and then it'll be raised up, but the raising up is his body being raised up as the new temple from an individual. He's a human person, right? And he is the new temple, like the temple that is a collective ethno tribal framework of reality will be
Right.
dissolved, and then it won't be raised up in vindication, but in replacement of that, the individual temple of him will be the new proto model for all of reality henceforth in history.
Right.
So what
Right.
happens is when you take the sacred out of the domain of the collective institution and move it into the person, the human person, that is a nuclear explosive phenomenon that's happening, right? And that's what we're undergoing right now, 2,000 years into this, is the furtherance of how do human beings wrap their brains around the idea that they themselves are, as a body, a temple of God, and not their big other of their gender or their race or their nation. So everybody is trying to point out that Christ-like apocalypse of their neighbor, but they can't see how they're doing it themselves. So the leftist feels like they're apocalyptically exposing the truth of that old order of temple in their conservative counterpart, because they say, look, you guys are nationalists. That means you guys want the nation to be sacred, right? And even if that means mowing down the vulnerable and the hurt and the little guy, that's their framework of reality, right? Or so you want, or you want, the patriarchy. So the collective of male power in the world should rule and be the big other that binds us together, to the exclusion of all the people that hurts, right? Then the right says the same thing back at them. They say, well, what about you though? You're the one that wants the collective. You're the one that has all the power of the FBI, the CIA, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all the major media outlets, the universities. I mean, you have all these collective powerful institutions. You're mowing down the human person. I mean, you guys are laughing when Ashley Babbitt gets murdered, and you don't care because she was on the wrong tribe. So you don't care about the human person as sacred temple. So each one is seeing a part of the of the uh, of the flaw, right, in the other person's worldview of lacking that reflection of the truth, which is that the human person is sacred, not the collective temple, which is a emblem of the collective identity. The group collectivism and all of its different flavors and forms is still alive in the world today, but it has to masquerade as a representative of personhood, right? So the leftist critique is, well, you can't have a conversation about personal freedom unless you deconstruct, these external identity markers like gender or race or these other features. They have to be totally opened up and broken into pieces and explored for you to have any kind of true freedom. And in order to do that, you have to kind of have a coercive, powerful state. So they go right back to begging for their temple, their temple, their collective temple. I mean, they literally call our democracy a sacred, temple that is under threat all the time. And that's totally religious language trying to return to the era that was dissolved by Christ when he resurrected and the temple stayed not resurrected, right? And he is the new temple. And that is the prototype of how like society and meaning will operate. When your personhood is the temple, that's what gives you the foundation to have an American dream where you can come over here with 2 pennies in your pocket and become a millionaire, right? The idea of that there being personal fluidity up the hierarchy is only possible when personhood is considered to be the place of sacredness, right?
Right.
But humans are always trying to find a new asterisk to get out of taking care of the sacredness of their neighbor when convenient. That's the problem we're in. You know what I mean? The right keeps saying, well, we got to beat the left and just totally beat them at everything they have. And it doesn't work that way, because if you use the same strong-handed tactics that they're doing, you can win for a time. But in the grand scheme of history, it's just going to cycle back even harder. And it probably won't take that much long of a time. It won't be even grand scale anyways. I was
Right.
even being charitable with a grand view. It'll come back on you, probably because of how fast things change in our hyper mediated society. It'll probably happen faster. You have your perfect little FDR conservative like Curtis Yarvin pines for. He doesn't understand. He thinks he understands power, but he's never met Christ as the king of history. So he's not familiar with what that actually does to power.
Yeah.
He still thinks Christ was, whatever he thinks of him as, but he doesn't understand the nature of his project in destroying powers and inverting power. And so you can't unwind that. You can't unwind what he did to power and what he is doing to power. And so
but don't you think that this is kind of, I mean, maybe it sounds maniacal and maybe even psychopathic to say, but doesn't it's almost fun, because again, Christ unveiled all of this. It's taken 2,000 years to get to where media has such a play over our lives. I mean, the printing press came out and was invented as a technology because of scripture, because it was written, handwritten. It's like, it's only because of Christ that we got the printing press. It's like, it took all of this time to get to this point where now it's like, again, the whole point is the light turning on in the room. Boom. Well, what happens when the light turns on? The roaches scatter.
Yeah.
We're seeing Satan fledgling.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's got nowhere else to go. So it's same tricks, different day.
Yeah.
And it's only becoming more and more illumined. I mean, look at all these people stepping out of their normal bubbles. Again, bringing up Cat Williams, again talking about Kanye. It's like these people are willing to say things knowing that persecution's coming. That's what the early church did.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of the things they're saying is off and not grounded in factuality. That's what the early church did. That's why we had councils to say, hey, whoa, part and parcel this thing out. That's why St. Nicholas can punch people in the face. You know what I mean? It's like, we do that as, on your show. You have these podcasts. We talk about these things.
Mm-hmm.
We examine what's being said, and we find their truth, and we grab what's truthful in it, and we throw the rest of it away. That's called wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
That's called discernment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is Christ infiltrating and illuminating right in front of us. It's like, it's kind of fun. And like I said, that's kind of maniacal at the same time. Like, there's truly people hurting. There's truly bloodshed. But at the same time, it's less and less and less and less and less and less and less. We're downgrading. We really are coming to a head where, I mean, just Steven Pinker writes that book on this big book, and going through and breaking down the violence of our culture and how it is greatly diminished, including the statistics of the wars.
He wrote that, I think,
of the 20th century.
He knew Epstein too, so I don't know if he wrote that on the island or not. But because he had a different vantage. Yeah, he had a different vantage point than other people. But he hasn't written a positive book after that. After Epstein died, I don't think so. I don't know if anything went downhill after that, but but I mean, there's all, he's writing from the establishment perspective, so there's always, that's going to be kind of distorted to some degree. But I think the biggest thing is just that the devil and that symbol of the devil as an anthropological character representing systemic power and oligarchs and how they operate. It has to increasingly come come up with more elaborate disguises to dress itself as a weak little lamb. And
Right.
the makeup is getting more and more obviously BS, and they have to come up with a
Right.
new gimmick and a new gimmick and a new gimmick. Every time the lights come on, they've got a new ridiculous garb of victimhood on them. And you're like, nah, I see the psychopath. I still see the knife. Oh, show me your knife. Oh, you got a knife. You know, they come in, you close the lights off, turn them on again, and it's a little cute puppy. You're like, is that a little puppy? And you look at it, and then you see the little, oh, there it goes again. It's not, it's a wolf. It's a trick again, you know? So they keep coming in these little elaborate little costumes,
Right.
like Greta Thunberg. That's a costume, right? I mean, and she's a human person, but the story of Greta Thunberg is a costume for sick, pathetic weasels who are liars, cheaters, stealers, criminals, who hate human life in terms of its beauty, and they hate personhood. But if you hate personhood that much and you're going to make billions based on mass delusions, you have to operate under Christ's kingdom's rules to try to sell your deceit.
Right.
So you trot out a little girl in pigtails and say, how dare you? And you say, dear God, what have we done? The little girls are crying out for justice. That's a victim narrative, okay?
Right.
It's not real, right? And they have to always do that, like the stuff that happened with some of those policing things. The policing system itself is never indicted. Oh, we've gone too far with our tactics we escalate things, and there's ways to de-escalate if we actually just step back from a systems perspective. No, it's just pin the tail on the donkey, go slam. It's white people that did this. What? No, it's not. It's called dehumanized police tactics. Go ask Craig Cecil. He spent, more time than rapists, murderers, and terrorists in prison for, moving trucks, helping trucks with marijuana, and he spent 4 back-to-back life sentences. Trump pardoned him. I knew his story, knew him. He was white, and there's a lot of people like that. And it's, people who actually deal with these things understand it's deeper than that, the evil of our system. But it has to always hide and say, it wasn't me, officer. It was whiteness that did it. Oh, and everybody goes start screaming and yelling about whiteness. Oh, I'm white. Why are you yelling at me? Oh, but you're white. They start fighting. The state system's still there, and all of its predatory behaviors and its habit forming cultural influence is still reverberating over and over again. And so, but then it does get exposed, and then and then people have to have that cognitive dissonance of, well, I guess that wasn't what we thought. And here's the thing that's interesting. I'll leave it with this, because this has been an interesting discussion, but I'll leave it with this image that just came to me. When it says that Jesus dies on the cross, this is something I learned from Gil Bailey. The way he explains the language in there. It says that when Jesus dies, that the crowd that was gathered to watch him went away beating their chests, beating their chests. And, that's not a cultural habit. We don't go, I don't know, we don't do that. We don't do that kind of thing. We don't do crucifixions. So that's an alien thing for where we're at today. And we don't do, if we saw a crucifixion, we wouldn't be going, we don't know what that means. What are you talking about? Right. And it typically has been thought, well, that means like they're sad or something. No, it meant that they were confused. They didn't know what had happened. So it was their way of saying, what? I'm confused. What happened? Right. Which is the opposite of a scapegoat effect taking place in history before this, right? Because when a scapegoating, when a sacrificial ritual took place, depending on the type of ritual and its purpose, it was meant to create catharsis and relief. And that relief could come in the form of kind of a sadistic, vicarious pleasure in like watching the lamb be cut, right, and slaughtered, right? Let's say it's an animal, right? And the people are watching this, and it's very precise ritual. It's very, everything is the line between closeness to you and distance from you is so precariously worked out in the ritual of these sacrifices, whether it's human or animal, to create this kind of this suspension of disbelief. Not too real, not too unreal, not too close, not too far away, just right to give you that payoff, right, that you want, to give you your release valve. And that might come in the form of a kind of sadistic, vicarious pleasure of like, you know, people would pay, even in the 1920s, they would pay to watch a man get lynched. And it wasn't even about, it was not just color, it was people of all colors. Lynched. The 1920s, they would pay it was like I saw an advertisement for it in an old jail in Florida that they had preserved. It was like, pay 25 cents to see so-and-so get lynched this Saturday. And then afterwards, the doctor's going to examine his brain for everybody to see what's so, you know, why this guy's so evil. That was like an option, you know, like today, did you wake up and think that was an option for you to do? Like down at the city square, there'll be a lynching, pay a dime or whatever, the inflation, $15 now, 30, you know, $50. That's like so far from where we are. And that's just 100 years of of redemptive history taking place, right? So that gives you a clue of where I'm going with this. But my point is just that when you do the sacrificial ritual in its origin, it's meant to create a belief of the nobility of the person who's offering himself or herself as a sacrifice for the community. There's that type of ritual, like the woman, the little girl, the young lady who was found preserved as a mummy. I think she Inca or Maya. I can't remember right offhand, but she was preserved perfectly in this frozen situation when she went up to the mountains to be used as a sacrificial offering to the gods. It's one of the most famous mummies. She's fully intact, pretty much. And, you know, that was like a noble thing. You have been chosen to you've been chosen to be a vessel of our glad tidings and our sacrifice to appease the gods, which is actually just their own, you know, internal issues projected into the sky, versus other types of sacrifice where it's like the god is mad. It's actually you that's mad at your neighbor, but you can watch this lamb get slaughtered and that whole thing. And some person is getting kind of a sadistic, well, he's got, you know, that feeling of someone's getting torn up, right? And that provided a catharsis type effect for some other types of sacrificial rituals, but the same effect of release, union, oneness, right? Love is able to be opened up in that environment. But what happened with the cross, it says, is they didn't come away saying, the text doesn't say, man, that guy got what was coming to him. Thank God he's destroyed. They don't say that. And they don't say, oh, man, oh, wow, he really offered himself up for us. There's only like one guy, and then I guess his mother and stuff, you know, that would think something like that maybe. But the general disposition of the crowd is, I don't know what just happened. What? No release. No sadistic. I mean, there might have been at some point, but the conclusion of the matter, of the ritual, was no release. Confusion. Isn't that exactly where we are today? Confusion. We don't know what's real. We don't know what's true. One person has this event and says this was an event that happened. This was a terrorist event. The other person says, no, look at all the different people who were implanted by government and their friends in that crowd, right? One person presents JFK. He was just killed by a random crazy guy. And then the guy who randomly decided to kill him was randomly killed by another lone guy. And it's all just lone random dudes, even though he had everybody in the world in the high places who had problems with him. You know, so you know what I'm saying, like that there's a kind of like, there's no cathartic anything. There's no cathartic, aha, that was the point. That was our offering to the gods, or that was the person who deserved the power and suffering of the gods. There's none of that happening today. It's just confusion, right? Who's the good guy? Who's the villain? What is my gender? What is, what's my history? They had the Miami thing the other day on New Year's Eve or something, where all these police came to a Miami mall, and everybody was saying it was aliens. They couldn't even believe that it was just, youth or whatever, as the media says, because there's so little credibility with the media, and there's so little credibility with government officials, that when they say there was just a bunch of youth brawling, they said, no, there was aliens. Epstein didn't kill himself, but other people say, that's what they say, he didn't kill himself. And then the other people say, well, he's still alive somewhere. There's no catharsis in any of that. You see what I mean? There's no catharsis. There's no, he got what he deserved. There's no, you know what I mean? There's no, he was a noble, person. There's no anything. It's just confusion. We all know that these characters that are presented before us can't provide any solutions. And we choose to cling on to any suspension of disbelief that we can find, but it still doesn't provide any cathartic relief.
But don't you think that's what I'm saying, is that's a good thing?
Yeah.
Because in confusion, right? If the great mother is a sea of chaos, then the father is the rock. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the moment at which truth can be unveiled.
Right.
If you have no sea of chaos, if you have no stormy ship, you can never see who the leader is. You can never know what the truth is.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of Christ.
Right.
Right there, what you just said. That's the whole point of it, is that we can get to this place of mass confusion, mass chaos, so the truth can be seen.
Right.
Think about the moment, like I said, with the lights. When you open your door at night, you have no outdoor light. You're coming through the door. You're fumbling. You can't see nothing. You stub your toe on the kitchen sink. You're trying to find a light in the darkness. That's chaos. You don't know what is. You don't know what isn't. You don't know what. Flick the lights on. There's that moment of your eyes having to adjust, and it's the blurry things, and your vision is askewed. It takes you a couple seconds. That's where we are.
Yeah.
That's where we are as a culture. Media has lost the message. We've heard that the medium is the message. No. They've lost. The game is up. Nobody in the middle of 9/11 was saying, "Oh, I don't think so." It took years and years and years to get to that place where we were able to question.
Yeah.
This was in the middle of COVID. We have people saying, hey, there's another way through this hell.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of the thing. They couldn't even let the game go the whole way.
And then they ran out.
Hey,
then they ran that. They ran that direct to DVD special of monkeypox, and that got kicked.
They quit at halftime.
They kicked that monkeypox thing out the door fast because they didn't work. So
that's what I'm saying. This is beautiful.
So who was that idiot? Who was that evil genius in that one? Who's like, all right, what do we got next? We did that, our big thing we've been working on for years. We patented that spike protein thing. Man, that was a lot of money. That was great. A lot of power. And then they're like, okay, what do we got next? And they're like, hey, Igor. And he's like, I have monkeypox. And they're like, what? He's like, yes. And how's this going to spread? It does it this way. And they're like, well, we've got the victim narrative we could do with that one, but it's not spreading. It's not, it's got some Hollywood flair to it, Igor. It's got monkey in it. That sounds terrifying, like Jumanji or something,
Right.
Well, let's roll it out. Let's see.
The fruit bats.
Igor did not do his homework. That thing did not run.
Mm.
So then they go back, and they I'm sure they got somebody else in there that whose idea was the corn? We're going to inject corn into people next. What is that? Yeah, we're going to put corn in people, cream corn. That's my next thing.
The problem was on the chessboard of that moment. They didn't realize there was a Peter McCullough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They didn't know.
And millions and millions and millions of people who would have his back to some degree, and
Right?
to some level. Hey, it cost me a YouTube channel, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
You can hear me out there, robots and YouTube land. I'm still
robots.
Nothing to see here. These are not the droids you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're right. And the only way you can break out of that is skin in the game. That means staying out of debt. I'm going to go back to the routine. Staying out of debt. Don't have mortgages, move in with your grandma, take care of it, whatever, multi-generational living is not anathema. That's the thing,
Yeah.
That's actually the way much of the world lives. And it's not an inherent like human right that all humans in America have to have imperial privilege right now. You got to earn that privilege. You got to be able to build homes that people can afford, if you want people to have a home, you know what I mean? And you got to make debt that's not usurious if you want people to take a loan, and you got to have money that has value if you want people to save and do something and work that extra shift. You know what I mean? You have to do stuff. You have to make things. You have to build things. You have to create things. And that's what we were told to do from the beginning. And it just goes back to this question, like, does God heal people's eyes in the Bible? Does Jesus heal people's eyes because it's just a metaphor for how you need to clean up your wickedness? Or is it actually just not just that, but it's also because he loves eyes and he loves the way you look at things. He loves how you look at things. He loves how you enjoy looking at waterfalls or apple pie or snow or whatever. He loves your experience because that's what a loving father is like. They really enjoy those little things with you and they care about you. And that's the thing about that question, is that the answer to that question reveals whether you're ready to imitate Jesus and get out of the boat. Because if you care about the world for itself, because God made this world and it's good, and we are to restore our work that we were started off doing, which is to cultivate this world, then when you get a right relationship with God, that's not the end all be all of what you're supposed to do. It's now to use that relationship to enrich other relationships in your lives. And that involves, cultivation of nature and ideas and all these things coming together. And that's the bottom line of what we're supposed to be doing. We have to have that impetus to, take risks and do things that are not risks for. You don't take risks because you want to be a star. You take risks because it's a joy to do things excellent and to do things in a beautiful way, right? And to provide value for other people around you, and that's not a sinful thing. To provide value, real value, is actually look at where people actually are. Do they need another stock option, or do they need, a home without debt? Do they need an environment where food is abundantly not toxic to eat? Can cheap, affordable food be not toxic? Can we do that? Let's start there. Can it taste good and be not toxic? Absolutely. It's obviously true.
Yeah.
But we've only just started the seed oil revolution. We've only just started it. Probably 5% of the 10% of the population at best understands their deleterious effects. 5 to 10 somewhere. Maybe I'm being generous. Probably 5%. That's a long way to go, but it can happen faster, right?
But that's a lot better than the 0% in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. We're better than we were. Yeah. And then you could say, well, we're not as good as we were in the era of the 1800s where we didn't have seed oils, but we had other problems back then too that we've moved past. So there's always this give and take of failures and achievements in humanity, that we're moving towards a vision. So I really appreciate your time, Jordan. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And if you want to stay in touch at A Neighbor's Choice, you can email me hello@theneighborschoice.com. I'm David Gornoski. Godspeed.